Hello and welcome to OffScript. I'm Josh, CTO at edtech company Genio, and I'm joined by James, who runs a digital consultancy called Parallax, making beautiful software. Today we're going to be talking about how to regain control of your AI spend as things are creeping at the moment as AI becomes more expensive. So James is going to just set the scene a little bit on some of the things we're thinking around this, and then we'll dig into some of the topics surrounding it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as everyone's aware, the nice sort of subsidized AI spend, it feels like it's coming to an end, especially for enterprise who've been on sort of metered billing for quite a while now. These newer models also chew through tokens, so it's starting to become a bit of a problem, especially for CFOs who want to sort of curtail AI use or figure out what the ROI is. I mean, between us, I think we're pretty clear there is an ROI, but it is starting to get a bit eye-watering with some of the token costs. So, yeah, that's what the topic today is.
Yeah, so I guess there's a few shifts happening at the moment. You're seeing a lot of the sort of metered tools going, from sort of like into usage-based pricing essentially. And you go Copilot. Copilot was one of the recent ones to make that change, and I think people are starting to feel the pain of that a little bit. Especially we've been looking at the sort of transition to enterprise plans on Claude from some of the sort of pro ones. It's a huge jump, isn't it? And obviously, the reasons we want to make that move is stuff like the compliance needs, the sort of data sort of regulation needs. So there's lots of reasons why you'd make that jump, but it's a huge price gap, isn't it?
It is, and yeah, it could be 5-10 times more expensive depending on how you're using it. The capped plans were extremely good value, and they hid a lot of cost, so you didn't really mind how you were using it. Now, I think people are going to have to more carefully measure how they're actually using those tokens. It kind of has to come bottom up because the people that really get it are the ones that are using it the most, and they need to monitor their own usage in ways that make sense to them. So we've been doing a lot of training with the clients that we've been working with. One of my colleagues put together a bit of a deck and some POCs around measuring, and a lot of these tools have actually got really good ways to extract that information. The
Mm.
great thing about Claude and other models is they often store every token that you ever sent on disk, so you can do analysis that way. There's also hooks, there's APIs, there's loads of different ways. We actually built a little Grafana dashboard that we spinned up in a Docker container, and it would actually show you in real time which models it was using, how many tokens, and graph it out. And then you can actually have like warnings and alerts and stuff. But you don't even need to be as fancy as that. Even a simple like toolbar across the bottom is really good. So Claude
Mm.
Code lets you make a little yeah,
Status bar, isn't it?
it's status bar. Yeah, you can add the current branch, but you can also add the number of tokens or the cache time as well, which is super important. But getting that in a way where each person can get a sort of sense of, am I really chewing through tokens right now or not?
Mm.
Sort of tweaking those little behavioral changes. And there's some surprising bits that we found where you're just clearly wasting money. So the clear thing that we found on a particular code base was, because we're working across lots of different repos, build up quite a large context before you even start the feature. Then you've got a plan and you start executing against the plan. That whole context, obviously all your system prompts like the skills, the definitions of MCP, that's all in your sort of prefix. That gets cached for about 5 minutes in Claude Code. And then as soon as that cache expires, you pay for that whole context again. So the worst thing you can do is build up a large context window, then get distracted, someone taps you on the shoulder, it expires, you press the button again, and you've just wasted $5 just pushing it back through.
Mm.
But it's little tweaks like that in behavior that I think the tooling will start to improve around this, or
Mm.
it'll try to keep it warm if you're actively there. But for now, you need to be quite careful.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of things at the moment where it's either unintuitive or unknown in terms of how some of the internals work and how that affects spend. I guess, as you said, maybe the harnesses will improve to a point where some of this stuff will, or maybe not even just the harnesses, but yeah, maybe some of this will improve over time.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, the smart context compaction in things like Codex and stuff will start to filter through into other tools. But for now, I don't think the model providers really care if you're wasting money at the moment. It's not really aligned to their goals, is it?
No, yeah, exactly. I've just realised my windows are getting cleaned and and my windows are open, so that's good.
Nice. Well, we've got a new guest on the podcast.
Yeah, welcome. I'll make sure that doesn't happen. But yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting, isn't it? So how are you thinking about budgets and spend budgets? Because like, do you allocate different sort of budgets for AI related spend on an IC level basis, or does everyone get equal token usage? Are you thinking about how people spend tokens in terms of different seniority levels? And we just do it so everyone sort of has access to the tokens they need, and if we need to top them up, we sort of give them top ups, but depending on the project they're working on, the type of work that they're doing more than their levels.
Yeah, so some clients mandate that we use their AI accounts because of data retention, security concerns, that kind of thing. So it's on the organization that we're working with to set those limits. Usually they set a budget and then you can apply to extend it. But by default, we're giving everyone Claude licenses, and then they can request a higher limit, basically. But yeah, it because what we do is like a lot of code. The budgets, we're not really too worried about the budget at the moment, but yeah, I can definitely see in very near future where we have to start like thinking about how do we actually curtail this a bit. We did redo the presentations that we've done for our clients internally, and a lot of our staff are already doing some of the things that sort of best practice. So yeah.
If you
What
look
about
at
yourselves?
well, it's interesting because I was about to say, if you look at the sort of shift to AI native that's happening across a lot of organizations, or at least everyone's trying to take that step forward into AI native sort of operational models. A lot of people are saying, you'd essentially treat token spend almost as the same as headcount spend on salaries and things like that. And I think it does challenge the model a little bit when you start to think about it like that. We were just talking before we hit record, like, enterprise licensing costs are going up hugely, and would you spend that on headcount versus the amount of tokens that you want to spend? And it's like, I think it causes you to really reflect and challenge on where you're spending and how you're allocating that across different projects, right? Are you going to be overspending on AI based development where you might not always make it back, for example? So I think it sort of changes how you rationalize those things.
Yeah, and because we at Parallax keep shifting between like pure like experimentation, like chuck stuff at the wall, see what sticks, to more consistent delivery, and we sort of oscillate between the two. So like we might go on Fable. So we did this with a customer where we just tried Fable out because we know enterprise customers might not be so keen on it because they've got different data retention. They have to hold on to it for 30 days, for example. Is this more of a prototype? We just went, let's make a little harness. Let's see how ridiculous we can get this going. And we don't really care. And we did the maths afterwards. It would have cost like $4,000 or $5,000 to do that work. But the output was extremely impressive. But is that a sensible, consistent way to produce work? Possibly not. People at Meta and others, they've almost been encouraged to go silly like that just to find the edges of things.
Yeah. Which is fine if you have the sort of budgets they have, right? But I think you've got to be more responsible in lots of sort of real smaller organizations, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think you got to balance experimentation and know where the stop is, and then take a step back, figure out the learnings, and then apply it more generally. But yeah, it is tricky. I mean, one of the big levers is obviously model choice, and should you be using the biggest, fattest model for everything? And I think everyone knows probably not.
Yeah.
But then that leads some developers down a hole of like, well, let's think about, these open source models. Are they any good? How do we host them? Could we self-host? But it's really tricky once you start doing the numbers, because if you rent a GPU, you're then on the hook for the cost when you're not using it. And actually,
Yeah.
if you start doing ballpark maths in a spreadsheet, it could end up being quite a bit more expensive than just the metered API usage.
Yeah, I guess this is the chat. I mean, it's the age-old conversation around build versus buy, right? And like, is it really something you want to spend your energy on versus delivering, value for a client or something like that? Because the infrastructure costs and just the focus shift of having to maintain that tooling versus just getting it off the shelf is always a way, I think, to weigh up, right?
Exactly. I think unless your hand's forced by data sovereignty or something like that, I think there's very few instances where hosting open source models on your own rented GPUs makes sense. If you own the GPUs already, maybe, but they devalue so quickly, don't they?
Yeah, I do. I think there's probably going to be. I mean, there already is like a huge decentralization of these things for hobbyists who are running them, on Mac Minis at home or on their own sort of systems at home. But I think at scale for a big team, ultimately, it still makes sense to try and buy and license that stuff in, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I may have some team members argue the other way, but yeah, you'd have to have quite a lot of consistent AI usage across the whole day to justify buying your own hardware and running it, and the electricity costs, and paying for the dead time effectively.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of model selection and how it can be more smart about the selection itself. You mentioned Fable, which is quite a hefty model for burning through tokens. That at the moment that still delegates to Opus 4.8 actually for most tasks that you probably end up using it for. How are you going about model selection? How are you going about being declarative about model selection and thinking about what the right thing is for the job?
Depends on the project, but often we'll use the most powerful model for planning, create a good plan, hone it, and then use cheaper model to execute on. And that's a really good way to reduce cost, and also makes it quicker. The smarter models can sometimes tie themselves up in knots with simple stuff sometimes. And this, like the sonnets, are a bit more surgical, is the sort of feeling. But yeah, your mileage varies very much depending on the kind of code base you've got and how it interacts with it. Some people have, very different requirements. It's quite difficult to know, because it almost feels like one-armed bandit. Like it, sometimes you'll try it and it'll be amazing, or it'll be really close, and other times you'll try it and it'll be way off the mark. And it's very difficult to benchmark that over time.
And what's your sort of take on, so the next thing around like following model selection is around token optimizations. A lot of stuff at the moment around how you can optimize token usage across the whole team. What are your thoughts on some of those approaches? You've got some of the more sort of parody ones like Caveman, which I've really enjoyed. But then you've got some of the more practical sort of compression tools that really help with that. Like, what are you thinking?
I think Caveman has been mostly debunked as a good thing, because often those more expensive models will actually do its thinking in long form and then go, oh no, I'm meant to be speaking like a caveman towards the end, and then pretend to you that it's being succinct. So this actual savings probably not there. Under most circumstances, there might be specific things that it does actually work out. But things like Rust Token Killer, RTK, one of my colleagues had been running that for a couple of months, saw some really good results. It actually gives you loads of stats. So what that does is these tools call out to the command line a lot, and they do ls, they do git commands. A lot of those commands are quite verbose, so like a go test or a docker ps or whatever, and it basically strips all the non-important information out before it gets to the LLM. So the LLM just thinks it's calling the CLI, and it just thinks the response has changed to be much shorter, and it doesn't care. So it just silently strips all that stuff out. And for some stuff, it can be like, 70, 80% savings, which is really, really, really good. There's a bunch of other tools that are similar. I imagine things like Claude Code will just fold these things into the tooling eventually. Yeah, loads of things you can do, but things like RTK are the big one. Making sure that your memory files are trimmed as well. So without you knowing, Claude Code and others will be saving to these memory files. They're right at the start of your context, and as it saves to that and it starts to build up, you've got combined problem of it busts your cache, so you pay for the whole thing again, and that can sort of slowly creep up. So it's worth checking. You can actually do /context in Claude Code, and it'll show you a visualization of where you're spending your tokens.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah,
it shows you a little like.
I guess is this one area where some of the earlier sort of concepts come into play, like context layering and sort of eager loading of context through like not putting it all in the single file, like big Claude.md file split ups and things like that. Are still really relevant approaches to try and optimize that, right?
Yeah, extremely relevant. And there is something that I've seen in the orgs that I've been working with where they've been using AI to write skills. The skills are massive because AI's written them, and they're really verbose. And actually, the newer model does a perfectly all right job at doing that task without the skill. Yeah. So just trim it right back to basically nothing, just the tweaks that you want to make that are specific to you or your company, and leave out the waffle. And another problem I've seen is the skill containing references to source code, and then the source code changes, and then you get this drift. So you end up spending a bunch of tokens while it tries to do a task based on the skill, tries to run the tests, and the code's drifted, and then it does it again. And you've basically paid 3-4 times the amount. When you've hired smart engineers to try and make it better, they've made this skill and they've actually made it worse.
Yeah.
So it's worth just double checking what happens when you delete those. Does it actually make a difference?
Yeah, it's a good point. I've not really considered that. I've written a whole host of skills for this OS that I'm using, and they are probably overly verbose. I should probably look at stripping them right back into something much simpler because, yeah, they're not doing crazy things. And as you said, like chances are you could probably do that without the skill in the first place at all, right? It's not too specific. It's like some of it's just triaging things or working through like research, which you're more than capable of doing without the skills in the first place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's your specific preference and it's something specific to the company, leave it in there. The other stuff can probably go, but it's the ones to think about are the skills that get invoked all the time. So certain skills are like, before you commit, do this code review. That's where your big savings is going to be, because that happens 20, 30 times a day. Whereas if it's a skill that you run once a week, like research these tasks that I'm preparing a deck for, what's no point optimizing that, because you do it once in a blue moon and you're going to spend $1 on it each time, and you're going to spend however many dollars of human time optimizing it. So
yeah,
I think there's a XKCD diagram, isn't there, of like when to optimize something.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been using a lot lately are sub-agents in Claude Codes. I've got these different agents that work on different parts of my sort of workflow. They also all run in sub-agents with clean context and different cheaper models depending on what they're working with. Yeah, I think that's probably quite a good way to try to strip that back too.
Yeah, the sub-agent thing is perfect because of the context, and that cheaper model can run loads of verbose commands, tests, whatever, and it only writes back its findings to the more expensive model. So yeah, it's perfect.
Nice.
And it gets a fresh context, doesn't it?
Yeah. So what about things like model routing? So the reason we're looking into this more at the moment is just the sort of redundancy and consistency of implementation, like, across the team. So how can we centrally control some of the models that the team are using, so we can easily switch things around and experiment, modeling usage and so on? Like, what are you thinking about model routing and how that sort of plays into this conversation?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting things to look at. There is obviously fusion models where you can have OpenRouter did a paper saying that they could fuse GLM, a couple of other models together for less than half the price of Fable, but the same. It was passing some of the same tests. So that looks really interesting. In enterprise, there is also the idea around MCP proxies as well. So some functions could call LLMs that live elsewhere. But yeah, there's loads of stuff you can do. I think it will become a big industry and concern in itself. I think every hyperscaler will start to roll out ways that you can just point at them and they choose the best models, and yeah, there's going to be everything in between. So yeah, it's super interesting. Especially think now that everyone's been spooked a little bit by the US imposing restrictions on Fable, everyone's thinking, how can I control my model routing? Obviously, Vercel have got a model routing product as well. Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's down to control, as you say. I think it's like looking at the parts of the infrastructure that you need to really own or need to really have control over. I think one of the themes that's coming out from this conversation is just around not accepting the defaults with all these tools and not just accepting the out the box way they work, and trying to really figure out how you can hone that sort of tool set to work for your specific needs. And yeah, I think, as you said, like if you've got a skill that's doing like a pull request review that's being like hammered every day, like 30, 50 times a day, like they're the areas to really like start making some quick wins on token usage and yeah, just figuring out how you can be a bit smarter with these things.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of these providers have got skill stats built in as well. Cursor have got a dashboard and it shows you across the org how often a skill's been invoked. So you can quickly open that and go, okay, there's 1,000 invocations of that. That's the one to look at first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's back to the, ultimately you have to have visibility into what's happening. So, if the dashboard doesn't exist, you got to make one. You got to start to understand these different trends and sort of patterns that you're seeing across the teams. And yeah, I think it's just probably one of the most important things to really have visibility into what's going on, instead of just blindly hoping that you're keeping within limits and it'll all be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to hope that everyone knows which tools they're meant to be using. Yeah, just hammer that home so that your stats look correct, because there's also like the shadow IT risk as well, isn't there? Especially if you start curtailing usage or asking people to save money. Just make sure that people are doing the right things.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I think you're doing a lot more of this than I am at the moment with lots of different sort of clients. It's nice to get your view on things. But yeah, I think we'll sort of close it there. Thanks for listening to Offscript. Hit the subscribe for more episodes in the future, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.